So when I do the work, it's coming from a whole nother level of passion and commitment. I truly feel like the work that I've done within the communities of Houston, learning the skills to articulate yourself when you have certain issues, knowing how to address trauma that you never dealt with before, having certain particular conversations with people that are difficult to have conversations with, but finding a medium to be able to do that. These are what the restorative practices that have helped me do.
Welcome back. So, restorative practices promotes relationship building, inclusiveness, and problem-solving skills through methods such as circles for teaching and conflict resolution for conferencing. Statistics show that schools that implement restorative practices within their school cultures see a decrease in numbers from in-school suspension and out-of-school suspensions. But the whole mission is to be proactive. And the only way to do that is to have schools fully invested from top to bottom. Now, I was a restorative justice coordinator at KIPP Houston High School, and I saw the difficulties that were up front, right, and close and personal with them. I had to work closely with administrators, teachers, and students alike to be on the same page and bring restorative approaches to daily routines. And that is something hard to do. But what I did notice was that it takes time to build restorative cultures and get rid of old habits at the same time within the school. But with the right people and the proper support behind those people, it is possible that it could be done right. And today at Translating Success, we are bringing and welcoming a experienced restorative practice practitioner and restorative justice coordinator at Ideas Public Schools in Austin, Texas, an educator, a former assistant principal, graduation coach, a father, a husband, and a new friend of mine, Frank Mendoza. How you doing, Frank?
Hey, how you doing, Carlos? Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. I appreciate you joining us all the way from Austin, Texas. And what I wanted to bring to you to start it off, how I got introduced to Frank. We actually met through LinkedIn. And as we spoke about in previous episodes, if you don't have the people around you or the resources around you, go find and put yourself in those spaces. Frank actually reached out to me and heard about what I was doing with restorative practices and my whole program. And we had a conversation. He wanted to learn about what I was doing and how we could collaborate and do work together. So we got on the phone very quickly, and I learned within 5 minutes, I heard Frank's story, and I was like, oh my God, like this guy needs to be on the show. Like, people need to hear his message, hear his passion, his inspiration to do the work within schools and in his communities and how it's transformed his life. And I extremely loved his story, and we connected off of like 5 minutes, 10 minutes over the phone. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring him on to the show. So once again, thank you for coming in, Frank. And what the first question I wanted to ask you, Frank, was how did you get introduced to the restorative practice work, and how long have you been doing it within schools?
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's a good question. Thank you, Carlos. Now, first, before I answer that, I want to give all glory to God, Lord and Savior Jesus, that has given me the opportunity to walk this line and to experience this road for the ups and downs that have made me. And I need to recognize that, because without him, definitely we wouldn't be crossing paths. We wouldn't be in the practice or the experience that we've had. So I do want to recognize that up front. I am a godly man, so I want to make sure I give credit to what credit's due.
Absolutely.
All right. So how I got introduced to restorative justice in schools, as a youth, I always needed mentorship. I always needed that successful male individual in my life that was going to allow me to be me, to be free. And if I screwed up or messed up, they were not going to judge me. So I found that in the principal's office. I was always getting in trouble. I wouldn't talk back to teachers or whatnot, but I really felt like my connection with leadership, strong, educated people, was going to help me. But I didn't know that just yet. I just knew that someone was going to be there that was a person of authority and they were just going to hear me out. I didn't know what restorative practices was of the youth, of course. And then I got into, teaching and things like that. And then I started recognizing, like, man, I'm conferencing and connecting with small groups, with students, and teachers are coming up to me saying, yo, like, you have a story, you have a struggling sport that turned into a success. You need to share that. And I was doing small group, and still at the same time, I didn't know what restorative practice was. And then in 2010, when I joined a company, it's a charter school up in Austin, but they were based in Dallas, that I really started looking into restorative practices. I was like, I didn't know this was called something. I didn't know give people a time to reflect and a time to listen and their story to be heard, and it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to talk about failures. So that's when I said, I didn't know this was it. Like, they have sin stems and, they got things going on. So I really bought into that. And I was like, that's what's up. Like, was restorative practice done on me from my principals or from my leaders? And I wouldn't have known. And then I started getting into it. And so I've been doing it since 2010, but I really, really started getting into it in 2015 fully when I went for a charter school up in East Austin, and they gave me an opportunity to be a restorative justice coordinator.
Wow.
And from then on, I've been doing it. I've been doing the practice. I've been living it. And I know we'll get more into that, but I feel that, being a facilitator, being a part of the community in the circle, being a part of these stories, and I can share those stories and connect with students and family stories. I think I found my perfect puzzle,
That's awesome, man. And similar to you, I didn't know what it was, but I had exposure to type of mentorship that I was getting from my coaches and from other people that I would meet in school, but it never really had a name to it, right? And when I got introduced to it, and then I started doing my speaking, I wrote my book, and somebody told me, like, oh, there's this practice that connects to that. And that's how I got introduced to it too. I mean, you have way more experience than me in the field and doing it within schools. And that's why I thought it was essential to bring you in. And I wanted to dissect like the experience that you had coming from your background and everything. What was the most difficult thing you found when you were implementing the practice for the first time in a school?
I think the number one difficulty is you're going to run into educators, and I'm one of them, and you are as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of I firmly believe that when the adults get it right, the kids get it right, and the families get it right, and the community gets it right. It takes adults.
Yep.
So the difficult thing that's always that I found was people believing in the process, people trusting the process, and people actually caring and having empathy for the process. A lot of educators want quick fixes, and the restorative approach is not a quick fix. When you're a teacher, you're doing lessons, you're grinding, and you're trying to get the objectives out of the way. You're making sure that you're getting your data, and you're tracking everybody, and you're owning your success. And you just want these kids to learn and get the objective, master it, and let's move on to the next one because I got a timeline.
Yep.
So when you're so accustomed to timelines as an educator, and you're bringing a restorative approach to say it's going to take time, or it's going to take steps. It's going to take growth. It's going to take ups and downs. A lot of teachers, don't want to hear that type of, they want an answer quick because I got to move on. And I think a lot of that's where the gap is. But just giving that brief history to teachers, and I firmly believe teachers want like great processes and practices and steps, but I think the most difficult thing was the buy-in. And you gotta surround yourself around leaders. Like if you're starting at a campus, you gotta have a principal that's gonna be gung-ho about it to say, like, hey, I believe in that practice. And the principal's gotta be vulnerable too, right? The principal's gotta say, yo, like I don't know that much about the process, but I wanna learn. And whatever you do, I got your back. Whatever you do, like whatever you try, I got your back. Because, leaders want success as well. You know, it falls back on the leaders on the campus. So if you're implementing a practice and it takes time, you know, they got deadlines as well. So I think that was one of the most difficult things for buy-in and trying to throw these hooks, right? Trying to throw that oh, I got it. And there's always like one or two teachers that really fully believe in it, and they've sat in a circle or they've witnessed it, and they're like you know very surprised, and they're like, yo, like this is it, and I wish I could do that, and man, like I wish I was you type of thing. But it's not all about the facilitator; it's about the community, you know.
Exactly. I completely agree with that, and I think I struggle with that too, getting, like you said, the buy-in, and because everybody, we said this in previous episodes, everybody is talking about the kids wanting the microwave success, right? The quick fixes. But teachers do that as well. And I had to come to terms with, I was like that as well, where I wanted something to work quickly because I wanted things to flow so I could go through on the day and make it easier for myself, right? But finding it, the purpose behind this will make your job easier long term. Right? If you do it, if you do this work, this restorative work, you build these relationships, you build the trust. It not only makes the job easier for you, it makes the job easier for everybody, the students included. And everybody just feels like it's a better community and it's able to work and function. You could try new things here and new things over there, but I think it's all about getting the buy-in. And I know you said it earlier, and I had said it in the beginning to the intro. It's all about, you know, getting people to see how it aligns with their life, right? And building it where, like I've been mentioning this for a while, it's a lifestyle. And I built my curriculum and my program to kind of promote, you know, this lifestyle shift instead of something you do within the confines of the job at work and then it becomes an act. Right? It's not about that. It's about being able to make it a lifestyle where you're taking these practices, you're doing it at home, you're doing it with friends, you're doing it when you walk into the store, and you're doing it when you're in front of the students in your classroom, right? It becomes something that it becomes more natural, and then you can actually make it work within your class. But that's the thing. Are people really ready for that? And what the reason why I thought it was important to bring you in was because I know your story has built you to make this work more of a lifestyle for you as well. And I wanted to ask you straight up, how has your background influenced you in making this impact or keeps you doing the work within the schools?
Right. I think, you know, the thing is because losses, right? I think losses make gains. And I want to touch, and I know that's but I really also want to touch back on, you know, the difficulties in implementing the practice.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got two scenarios for you. Yeah. So you said the microwave effect, right? You know, I think that's very important. You said that. It makes me think like a baker, right? Like every procedure that's put in place is a baker. So there is never a good meal without a mess. There is never a good there is never a good entree without the mess in the kitchen. People just want their order. They want to order. It takes a process. They get impatient, and the order comes. Voila, you get it, and you're about to chow down.
Yep.
I think people want that aspect, but people also need to realize that every successful baker always made mistakes, and it's a mess in the kitchen.
Yes, it is.
It is a mess in the kitchen, and you got to follow steps. Guess what? The first time you do it, the steps are gonna. You're not gonna follow. You may skip one. It's not gonna come out like you expected. And the main thing is patience, right? When you put that masterpiece in the oven, you have to wait.
Yep.
There's patience.
Mm-hmm.
You have to wait and wait and wait and monitor that wait, monitor the time, monitor the temperature, and before you know it, it comes out. So I think that's one of the scenarios that we can put in place on implementing the restorative practice, that it's a slow wait. But at the end, like you said, the longevity of it in the long run, it tastes good, right? It's a great meal. It's a great thing. And I think you know, when you want to paint a picture of slow process, I think using that baker metaphor is very important.
That's a good one. I like that.
And not everybody's gonna like the meal, right? Not everybody's gonna like the meal. So so we want to make sure that. And then implementing the process. I was reading this book, and it's an awesome book. It's by Ron Clark. It's called Move Your Bus. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But
Ron Clark, is that the guy who built the academy in Atlanta that got a lot of praise?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
gotcha. Yeah.
And I actually went to that to that academy last
year.
It was awesome. But he has this book, and it's called Move Your Bus, and he talks about knowing your people on your team.
Yeah.
And he describes 4 types of people. He describes them as riders. Those are the ones that ride on the bus, that ride on the team. That hey, I'm just gonna do what I got to do, but I'm riding.
Yeah.
And then he has the walkers. He has the walkers that he implemented. That those are the ones that hey, I'm gonna walk, but I can also walk left. I can also walk right. I'm kind of into it, but I'm really not. But I'm still walking.
Yeah.
But then he has the other ones called joggers, and so those are the ones that will put themselves for the team. And hey, but they need to be told what to do. Those are the joggers. But then you have the runners. The runners are the ones that go above and beyond everything that, hey, if it messes up, oh, well, I'm going to try it again.
Yep.
And I think reading that book really mirrors, like, the restorative approach as well. Like, what type are you going to have a runner, a jogger, a walker, or a rider a part of the implementation of the process and the practice. So, and you can use that with the campus leader too, right? Like, how do you label a campus leader? Are they a jogger, a runner, or a walker, or a rider? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but anyways, so to answer your question, like the background, like I remember clearly when I was 10 years old, my mom, she called me and she was like, yo, like, come here, I need to talk to you. I need you to come to the kitchen. And I go to the kitchen, and then my dad, he's sitting at the table, and my mom's sitting in there, and my dad was like Superman to me, when I was like at that age, right? I was like, yo, strongest man in the world. He went to go play catch with me outside, but not really, because my dad, he was a very, very heavy drinker.
Yeah.
He drank. He drank, he put things in his body he shouldn't have put, he smoked a lot. And so, my dad was whatever, he was like, yo, he did wrong, that's my pops,
Yeah.
So I remember him sitting at the table and my mom looked at him and says, you need to tell him. You need to tell Frankie. And my dad, like, couldn't look me in the eye, right? He couldn't look me in the eye. He kept on, well, no, you tell him. And my mom's like, no, you're the man. You tell him. You did it.
Yeah.
And I'm over here back and forth, right? Like, my head going on my mom, my head going on my dad, what are you talking about? And that's when my dad, finally opened up and said that he had an affair.
Wow.
And I didn't know what affair was, right? Because, I saw my parents together. My parents weren't the touchy type either. They didn't hold hands a lot. My dad, when he bought my mom a car, it was just he decided, because my dad had like a 2nd and 3rd grade education.
Yeah.
So he didn't know how to write or read and things like that. He struggled with that. So I remember him saying that. He's like, hey, I had an affair, and I said, what does that mean? And of course my mom was like, tell him the truth, like tell him what an affair is. He was like, well, I was with another woman. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, I mean, we're around people all the time, Pops. Like, what do you mean? Like, you're around dudes, you're around girls? I mean, what's going on? What do you mean? Like, no, I was with another woman. Like, and that's when my mom popped in and said, he's messing with another woman. Like, he's, and man, let me tell you, Los, man, like that really, really crushed me.
You say you were 9?
Because I was 10. I was 10.
Still.
And so that really crushed me, and I didn't understand it. And my dad was crying. He couldn't look me in the eye. And my mom was just throwing it at me, throwing it at him. You think he's the man of the house. You think he's doing this. Your dad is a liar. Your dad does this. And, this is something you don't want to be. And my mom at an early age was always telling me that daily. Don't be like your dad. Don't be like your dad. But like every prodigal son wants to be like their dad. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So So I remember my dad leaving, you know, because my mom said, you got to go. And I was like, what do you mean he's got to go? He's like, no, I'm kicking him out. He's got to go. He's staying somewhere else. And I remember my dad leaving, man, and I think that was the moment that I lost it, because he walked out and I was chasing him. I was like, no, Dad, come back. And that was, you know, and everything changed from that, man. Like, everything changed from that. My dad got heavy into drinking. My dad had his first heart attack at age 30. You know, he lived a fast life, and, you know, my dad's no longer here. He died in 2009. For his health and, you know, diabetic and stuff like that. But, you know, I always had respect for him for the education he had and whatnot. But it was tough, man. It was tough not having that male role model. And I think that's where I kind of got into, you know, the authority of, like, principles and men and education and men with authority, you know, but I knew in my background, we were poor, you know what I'm saying? We didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
So, and so when I go into communities and when I go into circles, you know, man, like, I remember the first time I did circles and I had to facilitate the first time, you know, being vulnerable was like, yo, can I say this? Like, can I be real? Can I share my story? And I just did one day. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to get expect reflection from these kids and being vulnerable to get a piece of their life when I can't give them a piece of mine? Like, that's not fair.
Yeah, truth.
And so when I told my story about it, man, like, the community just really, really opened up and accepted me. And they said, Mr. Mendoza, like, I went through that too. And like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. I thought you had perfect life, and I thought you just went to college. And I'm like, nah, man, you're looking at a person that struggled academically. And, you know, I did struggle academically. You know, and I failed third grade, and I was placed twice. And, you know, I was that kid that got, you know, the achievement gap is real, you know, and I was that kid that respected teachers, but I was quiet. But you know, a teacher would say, just sit in the corner, don't cause no trouble, and I'll leave you alone, you leave me alone. Yeah. And so that really hindered me, man.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I think this is a part of what I want to bring to the table, like this power and vulnerability. I'm gonna keep saying that. For all men out there, all young men growing up, there's nothing wrong with saying your story. And I think this is what we need to identify. We all have some type of trauma that we all experience, but who's really talking about it, right? And I think these people get into education and they haven't dealt with their trauma, right? I'm talking about teachers and administrators, right? And then they're put in these situations where they haven't addressed their stuff and they're not comfortable talking about their stuff because we're conditioned to say whatever happens in a household stays in a household, or don't talk about your stuff because that's weak. You don't want people to know your stuff. And I'm trying to break that. I'm trying to be like, yo, F all of that. I say, talk about it more so that you identify it better than anybody else. And it don't matter who knows. Like, everybody can know, but if I know it better than you, there's nothing you can say to me. And I think that should be the mission, right? So we can heal ourselves, because I had a similar experience. And I lost my dad last year, and his birthday was December 2nd. So it was a couple of days ago. And I'm reflecting on everything, and I'm thinking about when it happened, and my process and what got me to where I'm at now was a lot of that, oh, let me just let it out. Right. And I use the circle with my students, with administrators, to just let it out and identify it more. So it becomes less and less harder to like express or talk about. Right. And it became easier. And then going to therapy and continuing talking about it, finding ways to get better with communicating to my wife, and even having a conversation with my 5-year-old daughter that her grandpa isn't here anymore. And having that conversation, right? And I think it's important that everything you mentioned, right? And that's why I said at the beginning, everybody has trauma, but who's identifying it as trauma is the thing we need to recognize, right? Because everything you dealt with, right, helped you find a mission, a bigger purpose behind the work. You saw that your father had some things that he wasn't able to do, and he needed more support. So you want to be able to put yourself in a place where you want to grant that to others, and then in doing that, you're building your skills. For me, it's the same thing. My father had a less than a high school education. right? Well, he graduated high school, but he didn't go further than that, and he wasn't good in school. He didn't go to college. He learned in the streets without a father, so there was a lot of trauma going there, and he never really learned how to articulate himself properly. And the what happened with my father was that through the years, he was building up more and more trauma. He had trauma from a little kid, and he didn't know how to articulate it. And as he got older, more and more responsibility got on him, and he kept on layering it on and just covering it up, right? And then he never learned how to express it, and it got too far where he lost control. And I say it that way. And I see that happening to me, and it can happen to you, it can happen to anybody if they don't do the work of learning how to articulate themselves, learning how to express what's going on with them, and identifying their trauma and their situations. And there's nothing special about me, and there's nothing special about Frank or anybody else that's doing this work, is that we were put in that position and we started talking. And it was hard. It's like I was choked up the first time. Like I was choked up, teary eyed. Like I had to stop a bunch of times. But the first time was like the second time a little less choked up. The third time less choked up. And then so where I'm now doing a podcast and I could talk about it without getting choked up at all, because now I've identified it so much that there's purpose behind it and there's a mission where I'm using my story to help people express their story. And I know you're doing the same. And I love that, man. I appreciate you expressing your story and what's going on with you, and why you continuing to do the work for 10 plus years in different schools. And I appreciate that, man. Thank you for your service, for sure.
Yeah, man. And to talk about the masculinity, man. And I know you may agree with this with me, and you probably would. But how many times we're like, when we're in circle, we're in community, man, and we reflect like, yo, like, what is this process was done to my father? Like,
every day.
Process was, like, I'm going there, you know what I'm saying? We got it.
Yeah.
Like, how many of us have, or how many times have you been in a circle, you look at that kid and you're like, yo, that's my young dad right there. Or like, yo, that's my dad at that age. Like, I see that. And this guy can't, he's got a father that, like my dad, and we're telling him to be reflective and let me know, and he's got this shield on. I'm like, yo, that's because that's what our fathers were built to have.
Yep.
And I really think, and I know for a fact that I got into this practice because of my dad.
Yep.
Of the strikes that my dad had and the strikes that I had, is because we are trying to make a movement, and we're trying to break the cycle of these young learners, male or female, so that way we can turn this around. And when I'm in circle, I always, I feel like my pops is in a circle with me.
I agree.
And I mean, I know you agree with that, because the stories that we've had and the losses that we've had, our fathers are no longer here, and we got to pass the torch. And it makes me a better father. It makes me a better listener to my wife, because there's no going back, but sometimes you have to go back into those darkness to help those in dark. Yep. So that way they can see the light too, because someone did it for us. You know what I'm saying? That's not fair. And I fully reflect on God too. God came back for the crooked. Jesus came back for the lost, and it became powerful, man.
Yeah, I agree, man. And that happens to me all the time. I've been saying it, like, if my father could have gotten this support and this training much earlier, he would still be here. I completely believe that, and have been doing the work with knowing that in mind. And the second thing, Sam, I had that student. I can name him off the top of my head. I mentored as the Restorative Justice Coordinator at KIPP. I mentored this kid, Sam, and I used to tell him, you remind me of my father, man. And it was like crazy. Then I was like, that's probably what my father was feeling. That's what my father was going through, but he didn't have nobody. He didn't know how to like articulate it, and he used anger, and he's big and he's aggressive. So they you know what I mean? It just spirals out as a snowball. It starts spiraling out of control with people not, knowing how to identify what is actually going on. It's like a cry for help, not a personal attack on you. right? And that's what was happening to my father from school. And my father's from the era where they used to put hands on the students and with the parents' permission. And that happened to my father. And I remember him getting so bent out of shape just bringing that up. So it started back then all the way to his job that he kept for 35 plus years as a construction worker, where he would have these conflicts with his boss or employees, and he just couldn't, like, he could not handle conflict, and it used to kill him inside, and he didn't know how to, like, resolve situations. And I look back on that and I'm like, this is why I got to do this. Like, I don't want another person to go through what my father went through, right? And I look at it just like that. So it's refreshing to hear that there's another person with a very similar story, that's doing it with the same mission. And with wherever you are, and I think this is important for my audience to see, wherever you are, like, I didn't know Frank 3 weeks ago, right? And Frank looked me up, I looked up his stuff, and we connected, and we're doing the same thing. We're trying to impact change from what we experienced and what we see is a need. And you can find people like that, whether they in your space right now or you just go looking for them, right? They're there. We just have to start having these conversations, and start bridging the gap. And that is networking right there, right? For those who are confused about what's networking, that's networking right here, right? And I'm proud to have you on here.
I'm funny you say networking, because I tell teachers all the time, I was like, we can learn a lot from these kids.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're there, you got certified content, you're gonna teach them today. But I'll never forget when that student walked in my classroom and I gave him a fist bump and I said, hey man, you ready to learn today? And they said, are you ready to learn? Because it's a true reflection that we can learn a lot from these youth. And I tell a new teacher all the time, when a new teacher is first year teacher and they went to school for the content and they're excited and this and that, and they got to behave, they have a scholar that's tough. And I'll keep reminding them, like, these kids got more education than you, right? They got more experience than you. Well, what do you mean? I went to school for it. I was like, well, they how many years? They got kinder, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. They got 8 years on you.
Yep.
They got 8 years on you.
Exactly.
So, we can learn a lot from these kids, and teachers need to network with these students. And honestly, that's honestly how I became a great teacher at my organization. Using the restorative practice, I became a teacher of the year for IDEA Public Schools because of the practice. I had a homeroom my first year in 2016 when I helped found our campus in South Austin. Gotcha. And they gave me a homeroom. And we circled up every morning just for check-in. And I kid you not,
yep.
we had good attendance for like 38 days straight. 38 days straight. That has never been heard of at a school that I know of, that a whole homeroom of 30 kids coming to school every single day because they're excited to reflect and hear what's going on with their homeroom.
Yeah.
So you got the relationship, the data will come. Like the growth in academics will come.
Absolutely. And I remember when I was at KIPP, midway through the year, a teacher left, and every teacher has a homeroom, right? And she was having so much trouble with this homeroom full of boys that were 11th graders that were off the wall supposedly and disrespectful, right? And that was how they were being categorized and all that. And they asked me when she left to take over their homeroom, right? I was doing the work already on campus and had my own class, but I didn't have a homeroom. So they thought I would be able to do it. And I saw it, and like similar to you, I had this homeroom, and the first day we sat in circle. They weren't used to that. They over here bouncing off the walls and doing what they wanted. We sat in circle and we talked, and it changed everything. Now, like, it was eye-opening for them, and I saw that, and that was eye-opening for me because I was learning, like, I'm not the only one going through stuff, right? I was talking about what happened to my father, this and that, and then I hear kids that had similar stories already, right? Or went through worse things, right? And expressing it in circle, and then it just changed the culture. And I never had a problem with those kids ever. Like, we talked every day. They felt comfortable to come talk to me about anything. It didn't have to be serious, but it was just, you give a little to get a little. You can't just expect kids to give when you're not giving. And I think that's what they don't teach you in school. In school, they teach you like the basics of like what to do in front of the board, the material, the content, but that relationship piece and how to gain that relationship piece is which we need to learn quicker, right? Because we're thrown out there and then we have to like figure it out. And this is what I'm trying to help push into schools, and you're trying to do as well, where it's bigger than that. It's like you have to give a little more of yourself to be a teacher. It just can't be anybody could just walk in the door and be a teacher. It has to be there. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to have empathy and not sympathy. Because people go in with sympathy sometimes, and that's a wrong approach, I believe. It has to be empathy where you don't know what they're going through. So stop saying I understand, right? It's more of like, okay, how do I support you, right? Because I don't know what that is. I don't know how that feels, right? And then if you're able to even say that statement, it could change everything for you. But it's so hard to get people to get there because, you know, like I said, people haven't addressed their trauma, whether it's kids from their childhood that bullied them or felt a certain type of way about them, right? They haven't dealt with that, and then they get into spaces as educators and they see these children that kind of, some of them remind them of people that didn't connect with them or rubbed them the wrong way. And then understanding like there are biases there, right? And even saying like, we have biases, right? What are mine, right? And then how can I really connect, right? Not just how do I get that kid to listen? That kid's not going to listen if you don't connect, right? And that's what needs to be done. So, you know what I mean? Like I said, I appreciate everything you're doing. You've been doing it longer than me, so I look up to you and what you're doing. And I definitely want to go out to Austin, Texas, is an idea public schools to see how it's run and how you do it. Could you tell us a little more about how you got to idea again, and then like what's going on there now, how long you've been at Ideas Public School specifically, and what's going on with the administration there? Because I know when I was at KIP, the way I got into KIP, I met a principal that was all trying to figure out this restorative practice stuff, but couldn't, you know, he was trying different things, and then we connected. I spoke at his school a couple of times, and he just created the position. And I agree, it's from top to bottom, like you said. So I can only imagine the kind of like people that you're working alongside with in the school. If you could tell us a little bit about your relationship with your administration and the people you work with, and how that looks to actually get the viewers an idea of how it can actually be like implemented realistically from top to bottom.
Right. So in 2016, you know, at first, you know, when I found, because I live in Buda, Texas, which is a small little town, which is an exit down to South Austin.
Okay. And
I found that they were opening up a campus up in South Austin, Bluff Springs, Idea Bluff Springs.
Gotcha.
And when I looked it up, I was like, yo, like I got to get on. Like you know, I love the mission. You know, I love that the mission of just idea and just what it stands for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm just so blessed to join an organization that has 100%. You know, just recently in class 2019, 100% of the kids, man, got accepted to college, right? Like 100% of them. And so you got more than 750, you know, first generation college students, right? You know, 13 went to Ivy Leagues, you know, 250, you know, Tier 1 or something like that. Yeah. But anyways, like, you know, it's not rocket science, man. Like the organization was getting these kids graduated in, you know. So that was me, right? That's what got me. First generation. I got a story to tell, and I'm gonna tell that idea. Like that was my goal. You know what I mean? Like I was like, whether it be an idea at another school, I was like, I have to tell my story. I have to prove the story practice and within a company. So when I contacted the principal, you know, she contacted me back and said, hey, you know, would you like to join our team and this and that? And you know, we kind of chopped it up a little bit. Very, very, very good friend of mine. Like, she became a very, very good asset to my group. Shout out to, Miss Deanna Bruce, and she's still currently the principal there, which is great.
That's awesome.
In 2016, she was like, yo, I like your restorative approach. Do it. I'm all in. I don't know that much about it, but, let's go with it. Let's do some moves. And she told me, she was like, it's the first year, so it's going to be rocky.
That's good.
We can't just jump right into it, but hey, you can do circles when you can and this and that. And so that's where I kind of jumped in. I'm like, yo, like I'm down. And at the same time, it was a great reward because I enrolled my son, Princeton. I enrolled him in second grade on that campus. So I'm like, yo, like this is a blessing, right? Like thank you God, like for allowing me to do my skill and share my passion, and at the same time start a founding campus. And my kid was there, and I'm like, this is great. I get to see my kids' academic growth at the same time.
That's awesome.
So I started doing that, and then all of a sudden, we started kind of going in, and then we lost a few teachers, like the first week, man. And because founding year is tough. You start out with like a group of, 8 or 9 people, for one sixth grade and a CP, but it is tough. I mean, don't get me wrong, man. The training is hard, but like you gotta get with it, man. Like it's a tough organization, but it's a lovable organization. They get training, they get all this stuff, and they give all the tools, man. But it is a tough job. And so the first week, we lost a teacher, and I had to go into a classroom, right? And I remember clearly, the principal and I still joke about it, and she was like, Mr. Mendoza, we got to teach this class. And I said, I don't know anything about ELA. And she was like, oh, I'm certified in ELA. Let's just go with it. Why don't I take the first half of the day and you take the second half of the day? In the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, this is going to take some time to implement some restorative practice because I already had to jump in already. I was a runner, man. I was a runner from day one. Like I was like, it is what it is, man. Like I'm with you. I'm going to get these kids. On the road and let's go. Yeah. And so the full-scale restorative approach did not happen that full year. It was spotty because I started really teaching and really starting my actual job that I was hired on like 3 months later. And so I had to start late in the game, and that's why I got my homeroom like 3 months later, and it was that homeroom. It was actually an intervention homeroom. Like these were the kids that needed help, like reading, sixth graders that were like on second and third grade reading levels. And so I wanted them because they were, the academic struggle is real, right? That's where behavior comes in. Yep. And so a lot of, there was a couple teachers that had that homeroom, and I think, it really stressed the teachers out, and the teachers decided to, go, to take another position. I was for it. Like I told the principal, like, yo, I want that homeroom. I want that homeroom, and I said, I'll take it. Only a couple conditions. And she was like, what's up? And I was like, I got to do RJ with him. We got to have circles. Okay. And she was like, check, you got it. And I was like, awesome. And, of course, my alumni is Texas State University. So they were the UT Longhorns. And you shout out to the UT because being in Austin. But, I'm a Texas State alum. So I said, I got to change the homeroom name. They got to be Bobcat. And so we did that, and man, let me tell you, man, that was probably the most stressful year ever in my education life. Wow. But I had the most fun. I had the most memorable moments. Wow. And when I implemented restorative justice to that homeroom, not only did we have perfect attendance, but all those 30-something kids came back the next following year. I had the highest parent engagement survey. Like Mr. Mendoza talks to my mom, Mr. Mendoza talks to my dad, Mr. Mendoza straight up. Like parents were putting surveys like, wow, Mr. Mendoza's so honest and he talks about himself so freely, and when he messed up or when he was going through things in his life, that's the teacher that I want for my kids. Yeah. Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, so and at the same time, teaching rigor with idea. But the admin now, now that we're growing, we're on our 4th year. Now my 6th grade founders, when I was in homeroom, now they're 9th graders, and I'm blessed to be a 9th grade teacher with them. I seen them grow for the 4 years. But the admin is so supportive with RJ, man. It's still slow moves, you know what I'm saying? Because I think, like every organization, you have retention hurdles. So companies are always busy training new teachers. So you throw a restorative approach with them, to add that to their plate, they will get a little shocked, and they're still trying to stay afloat with lessons.
Absolutely.
They're still trying to stay afloat with the culture.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that is always on my mind, and I want to respect that too. So that's why I want to push RJ so hard, but at the same time, I have to think that new teachers, it's tough. I want to make sure that they get their feet wet.
For sure.
But at the same time, we gotta act now, because if we don't act now, we're gonna start losing kids. Being suspended is gonna get higher. Being expelled is gonna get higher. And so I want to make sure that I do that with idea. And I'm pushing RJ. Don't get me wrong, man. Every campus that I go to, I'm like, yo, y'all got RJ? Yo, y'all got RJ?
Yeah,
you got RJ? And some of them are like, no, we don't. Yeah, we do. We kind of do it, but not really. But I'm I'm trying to put RJ on the map with my organization and any other organization, because it's a must, man.
It is, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. I think that's what you just said is what needs to be addressed, right? We have all these schools, like the person who brought me into KIP, right? The principal and the school director at KIP, Mohammed Maharouf, he brought me in to KIP as a Restorative Justice Coordinator, right? Which was unheard of on that campus. There was never that title before. He had brought it on, and we were doing it, right? We're doing the work, and within the first year, he left after the first year. And then I was trying to be pushed into doing something differently. And then everything with my father had happened. So I took things into my own hand, and I said, I seen, something that needed to be addressed, which is, okay, how can I make restorative practice? Because I seen it working on my campus. I went and researched. I went and saw other people that are doing restorative practices. There's Anita Volva. She's at a Yes Prep, and she's been a mentor to me, and she does restorative practices at her school, and she has like a system that flows like a well-oiled machine. And the whole thing took 6 years for her to get it to where it is now, where she has kids that are deans. She has other kids that teach a course for freshmen, and it's like a system like I've never seen before. So I was learning under her, and I was building it. It was working within the first year. But as you said, it's rough the first year still, right? But we were able to do some things, and it was going on up and up. But then my principal leaves, right? And then it has to start over, where they were pushing me into doing other things, right? Other responsibilities. So, and this is why I took very serious precautions into creating my curriculum and my program. Because I don't know about you, but I used to go to conferences and restorative practice events, and I would go and I would feel great. I'm like, yo, this work is amazing. The circle activities were great, but no one really ever gave me any resources that I can actually use within a classroom and keep it going, right? So that kept sticking in my head. And I'm like, yo, that's not there. And I also had a homeroom, but I was fortunate. The position that I had, I mentored students, and then I taught a course called the Restorative Justice Council, where I had a group of, it was like student council. I changed the name. I called it the RJ Council, and I gave them the training of restorative practices with conflict resolution, circle skills. We did the training, that we went around campus and did the work, right? And within that, I had to create a curriculum, lesson plans every day for these kids and stuff. So I had that stuff. I was like, yo, let me just package this and do it in a way, align it to ELA TEKS, which is standards, and package it so that a first year teacher can use this. Whenever they have a lesson that's flopped, they can pull it out and just go verbatim and use it, and kind of, or if something happens where they need to start building the restorative awareness within their classroom, they can do so without not knowing what to do. They have the resource there, and that's where my motivation came from. And like you said, the passion is real, and everywhere I go, I'm pushing it, because I see the impact it could have, and it takes time, but with time, it will turn into what I seen, a well-oiled machine at a Yes Prep with Anita. And I would love to go and visit IDEA and see how your machine is working over there. Because having someone like you there, I can only imagine how this whole thing flows. So I would love to, if I'm ever invited, I would love to witness the IDEA, the IDEA
Yeah,
experience.
most definitely, man. We're definitely working on those next steps to have you on our campus, and we're excited to do that partnership. But yeah, man, I mean, I think, when people saw you in KIP, I'm sure you were the RJ guru, and they see me, I was the RJ guru. It's always been that hurdle to try to now teach it, and to support teachers to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, similar, like you said, the Restorative Justice Council, man, I kind of got the go ahead this year to kind of start that this next semester slowly, man. So I'm excited about that. I got about 15 students that really enjoy
Awesome.
circles, and they were just like, Mendoza, you need to train me. I want to facilitate. I want to do this.
Perfect.
So I'm excited about that next step, and because students own it, it gets easier for the adults because students know more than us. You know that.
Yep.
And so and back to, like, you talked about curriculum, man, that is awesome. You implementing that, kudos to that. I mean, starting from scratch and stuff, like, that is great. And I think implementing a curriculum for any, school, especially like someone like us that is trying to implement RJ on a campus,
Yeah.
it'll just have so much weight where a principal or an organization can come up and say, hey, I heard that there's an RJ curriculum,
Yeah.
and let's run with it. I think making things simple for leaders to say, yeah, let's do it. The curriculum's been written, and you have successful data, like, let's do it. And I think when you bring stuff like that to the table to leaders, because they want to see something, they want that one pager, they want to see that minute by minute, they want to see results, they definitely want to see the why. I think the why is very important for every decision that needs to be made. But I think I just want to give you that shout out for that curriculum, for that, and our stories, right? We are walking curriculums. I mean,
Exactly.
you're a walking curriculum. So we gotta be intact in that.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, and I love this connection. So the last thing that I wanted to ask you, before you tell us how people can find you and everything like that. Before that, the last question that I want to ask you is, what advice would you give our youth today, like someone in school that's struggling, that doesn't see a way out, or see it's tough to find those mentors? What would you tell a young man or a young woman out there right now that's hearing this podcast and is searching for that one piece of advice? What would you tell them?
First, I definitely want to let them know that they're loved, and whatever they're going through, we sincerely are with them, that we sincerely grieve with them, we sincerely understand their pain, but we also want to let them know that there's also light at the end of the tunnel. Like, things like this, struggles like this, is supposed to happen. It's going to happen, and it is okay. And it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to say the things that is going on in your life, to be reflective and to own it. And there's nothing less manly, more manly, or womenizing, whatever, but there's nothing that is less of you to share and be honest on how you feel. And I think people need to, when they reflect, they think there's boundaries. People need to understand that when they talk, or when the way they feel, it's okay. And if you feel like venting and you got to curse, you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly.
If you got to hit a bag, a boxing bag, you got to do what you got to do. But we are trying to have a plan for them to create before that happens. Before that happens. So we are our tools. We come to life, and like your experience, my experience, we come with tool belts. Like, we are coming to everything with tool belts, and not every tool is going to be used at a certain situation. So we're going to have that different student. We're going to have to pull a wrench out. We're going to have to pull a screwdriver out. We're going to have to pull pliers out. It really depends on the situation, but I really feel telling our youth that it's never too late to share that story and how much they have the more power than the majority of the kids that don't deal with issues. Because they're going to have that experience. When they go to a job and it gets hard, they're going to look at it and say, I've been through that before. This ain't nothing.
Exactly.
When they go to college and they write a paper and the professor says, hey, this ain't good enough. All right, well, cool. I'm going to make it good enough.
Yep.
Like having that grit. I think having that street grit and that emotional grit, like it's real. And like educating the students that you can use that to your leverage, because you already have a foot ahead of some of these people that don't know, that have never experienced loss, that have never experienced pain, and have never experienced darkness. So when you got a scholar like that, a youth that has gone through that, oh my gosh, and they use that and flipping it into the right way, and what the leader of a gang. Did you know you can be a leader of an organization, a positive organization, or a person that is, maybe they're doing drugs or selling drugs and things like that? Do you know that that's a skill? But let's flip this skill.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I think losses are good, and they're supposed to happen. And I think imperfection is okay, because we're not perfect.
Yep.
And who are we to judge? Honestly, I mean,
exactly.
it's written in the word. Who are we to judge? Who are we to hold people, to critique them in certain ways? But we don't have that authority. We do not have that authority. Bottom line, we don't.
I agree, man. That was, I think, the most important thing that you said was that, what I mean, this, and I said this before. My way of saying is there's privilege in being disadvantaged, right? There's some type of privilege in it. You have to just see it that way, like just knowing that everybody has their moment, and if you go through your moment sooner, you're more well equipped to deal with things that get harder later on, right? It's like I see kids, and I was around a bunch of my siblings were great at school, right? And I just wasn't good at school, right? I was failing, I was struggling, but I built these responses to struggle, like, okay, let me keep working. Okay, let me figure it out. Okay, and where, when you're passing along so well, and it starts building entitlement a little bit, where you skip that step of like, oh, I messed up, let me try again. It becomes like, oh, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and I'll get by, right? So some people is going to get to a point where that's going to stop. And when they build too much entitlement, people struggle with actually, oh my God, like I failed this big exam. I don't know what to do. And you hear this a lot, that the suicide rate is huge, especially in the business world, right? Where people are in the stock market and all of that, where people are losing it because things didn't work out their way. And it might be their first time where it got really bad, right? And they didn't know how to deal. And that's something that we need to address. Like, there's privilege in you going through something right now, and it might not look like everybody else around you struggle, but it is yours. And if we get to talk about it, identify what's actually going on with us and how we can use that, right? And find a purpose behind it to create something or build something or go or make something greater that is already there, right? I think this is something that we need to start. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's why I'm doing this podcast. Like, I want people to hear this type of stuff, and like whatever you're going through, like it's supposed to happen, and you can watch others' mistakes and learn from it. But it's all about you taking and what you're gonna do with it next, right? And you can use it to like build whatever it is you're gonna be, and have that be your mission, right? Because I never thought, like I never thought I would be saying what happened to my father would happen, right? But I could have like closed that in and never talk about it because it's so sensitive and it's so big to me. And I grew up in this household, like, don't talk about what actually happened, this and that. And I'm like, I'm breaking that, right? And I'm becoming who I'm becoming because I'm talking about it. So let us lead by example. So I'm glad you brought that up, man. I appreciate that. So
and like
go ahead.
Like, I go back to that tool belt. like for that tool belt, man, our job is to pass that tool belt to somebody else, so that way they can pass it on later on. Exactly. That is the main thing we're doing.
I love that.
That is it.
I love that.
We have to model what we preach, and there's a kid out there right now that's going to be the next Carlos, that's going to be the next Frankie, and that is our job. That way we can leave this earth saying we gave it all we got.
Absolutely, man. I believe that. So let's leave it at that. Frank, just a real quick, how for people to find you, if they hear this, they get inspired, they're like, who's this Frank guy? Where do you want them to find you? If you got a website, a Instagram, a LinkedIn, or a Facebook, best way to find you or contact you.
Yeah, so they can find me at Frankie Mendoza, and LinkedIn, Austin, Texas. I'm always posting stuff. I'm very active. Gotcha. I'm not as active as the other networking, but I definitely got to step my game up on that one. But they can also contact me at francisco.mendoza, 1@ideapublicschools.org. And then definitely on LinkedIn, I got my contact number on there. I got my email on there. I got my location of the campus that I'm out there. So I miss work, man. So I'm always there on campus, but they can always find me on that. If people want to connect with me, I don't mind. I'm looking forward to speaking at schools, maybe even having speakers come to our campus. That way we're networking back and forth, because this stuff's real. We need to be there for the kids. I really, really hone in on when students ask me, Mr. Mendoza, why do you do what you do? And I say, my answer is always because they said I could. Straight up. We got to get out there and spread it out. But they can contact me at LinkedIn at Frankie Mendoza, Austin, Texas, at LinkedIn.
Love that, man. And you got you got my full support in everything that you do. Go follow, go contact Frankie, and we're gonna be doing some work together. I look forward to seeing what how his school works and everything, and I hope everybody has gotten something from this episode and keeps in contact with Frank and with me, asks questions, videos coming, and everything's coming along. So I appreciate you, Frank. Thank you for coming, and for everybody here, thank you for continuing to watch. Bigger things are coming. And one last thing, I do have a huge event coming January 31st. I'm doing a huge mindfulness and curriculum conference where I'm presenting my curriculum in front of HISD administration and teachers, and then we're gonna go from there. So if you're looking for the link, I'm gonna post it to the video too. It's on Facebook, where you can buy your tickets ahead of time, so you can be there and witness it if you're interested in what this curriculum looks like. I'll be doing I'm keynoting and headlining the event, and then I'm doing demo lessons in front of admin and everything, so you guys actually get to see exactly what a lesson looks like and what the curriculum looks like, and it's not just something that I'm talking about. It is real. So thank you guys, and I will see you next week. Appreciate y'all. Later.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you, Carlos, man. I'll see you around, man. I appreciate everybody. God bless everybody.
All right, man. Take care, man. Thank you.